It is yet another dark day for Vince McMahon, the WWE, and professional wrestling. What's going on, guys? You tired of seeing me? What a week we are in the middle of here. My God. Royal Rumble week coming up. Big pay-per-view this weekend. Big news this week. WWE Raw going to Netflix. The Rock joining the board of directors on TKO. And now we have this massive, shocking yet somewhat unsurprising lawsuit that has been filed against Vince McMahon and the WWE. This is a massive sex trafficking, sexual assault, and emotional abuse lawsuit filed by a former employee by the name of Janelle Grant, and there is a lot of stuff to unpack here. We're going to do our best to kind of go through some of it here. This is a 67-page lawsuit. I read all of it. It's fucking disgusting. I have some highlights here for you. We're not going to read everything, obviously, but we are going to go through some of the key accusations here, some of the key points, and what this could mean for WWE and Vince McMahon and his future. Now, I already feel like the company internally had some sort of an idea about this because Vince McMahon has been slowly pushed out of the company little by little. Even some of his own family members were voting him off the board. I think it was understood and believed and agreed upon unanimously within WWE that the best thing for the company going forward was to get Hornball McEgo out of here as quickly as possible and out of the WWE corporate landscape. He is still sticking around like a fucking cockroach, but this might be the end for him. I do not see how Vince McMahon survives any of this. And what is so messed up about this, and I'm not proud to say this, what's messed up about this is when I read all 67 pages of this lawsuit today, each and every specific graphic detail that was described, and even some text messages from Vince McMahon that were also released in this. But when you read these extremely fucked up and gross details, you don't doubt any of it. Doesn't it sound exactly like what you would think Vince McMahon in the bedroom's behavior would be? Like, I mean, it's very, very unsurprising. It's infuriating and it's disgusting, while at the same time being like, well, yeah, that checks out. This is Vince McMahon. That's exactly how I expected him to behave in this way. He's fucking disgusting. He always has been. He is a pervert, a sexual predator, and some of the allegations here are extremely disturbing. So I do warn you, there is a trigger warning in some of these here once we start going through a little bit of this stuff. You know, some of the things that Vince McMahon was doing and saying, and some of the other things he's been accused of here in this incredibly long and damning lawsuit, which I don't even think is going to be the end of the bullshit with Vince. I mean, there's still a federal investigation going on. We don't know what that entails and what that's all about. And this is only one of a few women that Vince McMahon paid off. Apparently, the reason she has come forward here as well, because the agreement that she had signed that was supposed to pay her, I guess, $3 million. Vince McMahon stopped paying after $1 million, and then that's what caused them to file the lawsuit. And I'm just wondering how many other women are going to come forward, because NDA or not, you know, those will be protected under, you know, some laws of like sex trafficking and things like that. So if there's some really gnarly shit going on, I'm not even sure if an NDA is going to matter in those cases. But then again, Greg ain't no lawyer. Greg's a restaurant manager and a wrestling YouTuber. So only listen to me so much, you know. But I did have to come up here today and at least talk about this very, very ugly bombshell story that is, you know, not only unfortunate for the victim and victims, perhaps, of Vince McMahon, but, you know, also bad just for professional wrestling. They're trying to move away from this fucking psycho, and they're trying so hard to kind of move past this and move the company past, you know, the Vince McMahon era. But then again, it doesn't make the company look good at all, because how many people do you think knew about this? A lot of people, including our current Lord and Savior right now, Triple H, who we are all just thrilled that is in charge of WWE Creative. Triple H is Vince McMahon's son-in-law. Sure, he can play dumb and pretend not to know any of this stuff, but he fucking did. So did Stephanie McMahon. So did everybody. And what really blows my mind is right after the first allegations, remember a couple of years ago, what was the very first thing Vince did? Paraded himself out on TV as a big FU to the board of directors and everybody else, not giving a damn about anything. You know, Stephanie McMahon leading a thank you Vince chant, and Vince coming out there because he believed he was bulletproof and he wanted to show that. He wanted to exhibit his power to everyone. Remember what a nutcase he was? He even jumped and leapt off the ring steps when he was leaving like a fucking ballerina. His behavior was very odd, very weird, and I was saying back then, I said, there's just no way he's going to be able to survive this. It might be a process. It might take a couple of years, but I think this is the official beginning of the end for Vince. And it just seems like it's one blow after another. And as fucked up as all of this is that we're going to discuss here, it's not even all of it. There's more. There's going to be more. There's still ongoing things. And Vince McMahon is going to die a disgraced man. He is, because he had this long, great career, very successful, and he's going to go down, you know, and be remembered largely for this. You know, he's going to be a Harvey Weinstein type of, type of personality that really, like I said earlier, isn't that surprising. There's been so many stories about Vince McMahon all the way back to the Rita Chatterton story from the 80s and that rape allegation, you know, and, I guess masseuses in Florida and all these other different stories throughout the years we've heard of Vince McMahon's perversion. You know, now, you know, in the corporate setting, it sounded like he was a really, really, really bad boy. And there are a lot of people and a lot of women, specifically this one, coming out and revealing a lot of really, really graphic details about all of this. And it just disgusts me. I've been fed up with Vince McMahon for a long time now. You guys know that. I think he's, you know, he not only did the negative effect he had on the WWE product, but his ego, his demeanor, his personality, his behavior was really becoming a problem, not only just in the business side of WWE, but also what he is doing in his personal life. He's been estranged from Linda for years, and he's just been a dirty fucking pervert, not only on camera, but behind the scenes as well. So I don't know what the next step is here for WWE. I have no idea. I don't know how they're going to handle this, even though I don't believe, as I was reading the very long lawsuit, I did not see Brock Lesnar's name specifically mentioned, but a world famous former UFC champion is mentioned. So you just put two and two together here. And I don't know if maybe the first step WWE takes is pulling Brock Lesnar from any planned Royal Rumble appearance that he was going to have, because I was expecting him to show up at the Royal Rumble and toss out Gunther and set up a WrestleMania match between those two. But with Gunther now getting in Seth Rollins' face on Monday, Cody and Punk coming together, I don't know how much of this WWE saw coming, and maybe they began the pivot process as early as this past Monday, maybe even then, knowing that Brock probably wasn't going to be on the pay-per-view. And it would be weird if he came out now. We've been giving AEW a ton of shit for bringing out Chris Jericho when he's got a lot of controversy attached to his name right now. I think the Brock Lesnar stuff would even be worse. I feel like if you're Triple H, if you're WWE, you just have to pull him from this Royal Rumble. You have to completely and do your best to distance yourself and create distance between this disgusting story and your product as humanly possible, especially since we're in the middle of WrestleMania season right now, and WWE is doing pretty good business and kicking ass and is very entertaining. As from a fan standpoint, we've been very excited about the Rumble this Saturday and WrestleMania this year. We all have pretty good feelings about all of it, that it's going to be a lot of fun. And now this is just yet another ugly, dark cloud over WWE, largely due to the behavior of their longtime former owner, Vince McMahon. And I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what the right damage control process would be, because you would think that's what they're trying to do, calm everything down here. Are they going to have a presser after Royal Rumble? Are they going to have to cancel that? Are they going to have to sit there and field those questions? And you wonder, too, looking back, as you put all this together, now you have to go backwards in time and put together this timeline. Maybe one day we'll do a big video on this and really chronicle everything as it happened one by one. But when you think back to those first allegations and Vince leaving the board and then muscling his way back in and all of that, you know, it's really kind of disappointing that he was allowed to still be involved that heavily when the company knew about all of this stuff. And especially the people close to Vince, there's no way they weren't aware of this, that they didn't know it. And now I feel like trying to weather this storm is something that WWE doesn't really need right now as they're heading into WrestleMania. And like I said, I don't know what the correct next step would be. I'd hate to be Nick Khan or the board of directors or Triple H or anybody needing yet another monkey wrench thrown into your shit. But like I said, maybe they kind of already knew this shoe was going to drop, and there's probably going to be another shoe dropping. So maybe they saw this coming, and that's why they maybe set the foundation for some WrestleMania stuff on Monday. We don't know, but it should be an interesting next couple of weeks in WWE, and the next couple of days, as now we're going into a much anticipated and highly anticipated Royal Rumble on Saturday. And I feel like this dark cloud is going to be kind of looming over all of it. And it just sucks. It just sucks for everybody, and it sucks for the victims. And it just sucks that stuff like this just continues to come out about this asshole. So anyway, we're going to get into it as best we can here. Like I said, I'm kind of coming up on the fly. Busy day for me. But when I read these stories and this lawsuit, I'm like, well, we better come up today and talk about this, because tomorrow we have a podcast planned where we are going to predict the Royal Rumble. And I felt like if I waited until tomorrow to talk about this, it might just take up way too much time. So we're going to do our best to kind of talk about it, since this news is brand new, only dropped a couple of hours ago. Of course, I've got notes. I've got highlights from the lawsuit that we're going to read and try to break down as best we can, and, discuss any other potential consequences, that could be suffered by WWE or Vince McMahon. And you guys have been watching for so long. What I've been saying ever since, I guess, like Brawl Out last year, after All In, Brawl Out and Brawl In. What have I been saying for about the past year now? Look at WWE and AEW and the massive momentum shifts both companies have had in just the last couple of years. And I kind of warned everybody, don't get too excited. If you're a tribal fan and you're firmly on the side of one company and opposing the other, don't get too excited if your side is doing great, because overnight things can change. And everybody was riding high on the AEW bandwagon. They were doing great things in 2019. Even when the pandemic hit, they were doing pandemic wrestling better than WWE. And they had just an energy and an enthusiasm to their product that was very attractive to fans and to wrestlers. And they were really looking like they were going to be putting pressure on WWE that was growing stale, with an out-of-touch head of creative owner in Vince McMahon doing nothing in terms of compelling storylines. It was very, very bland and passionless and emotionless product. And then the scandal hit. Vince McMahon kind of took a step back. Triple H grabbed the reins. WWE's product slowly began to improve. Cody Rhodes coming in, the whole CM Punk fiasco, and just like that, AEW, who was looking like the place to be, the grass is greener over there. Adam Cole, Bryan Danielson, countless others making the big jump to AEW, and then just like that, Brawl Out happens. CM Punk hates the Elite. There's the big brawl. They have a year of drama and uncertainty. CM Punk comes back to start Collision. It lasts 2 months. There's another brawl, morale, turmoil, controversy, all over the place in AEW, which really sent them on a downward spiral, while the WWE was doing the opposite. Now Triple H is in charge. Their wrestlers are over. Their storylines are over. They got the Bloodline. They've got Cody. They've got Roman. They've got Sammy. They've got Owens. They have LA Knight. They have so many over stars that fans actually like and pull for. And then CM Punk comes back into the company, and then The Rock comes back, and WWE is, shooting to the moon, right? And then boom. Just like that, one lawsuit can really change the tide. Now, I'm not saying WWE is now the number 2 wrestling company and AEW's number 1. I'm not stupid. I'm just saying, like, the way the momentum has gone for both companies in just the last couple of years, up, down, has been wild. So you can never really take anything for granted. You can never really get too complacent, because at any given point, crazy shit can happen. And we've seen a lot of massive headlines in the last 2 years, huge headlines, 3 big ones this week alone. You've gotten me 3 straight days here on the channel. We did the Raw review on Monday night. I did my Hulkamania Hulkamania 40th anniversary video on Tuesday. Then we were up here to talk about The Rock and TKO and the Netflix and WWE Raw story. We took last night off. Looks like I missed kind of a pretty boring Dynamite. And then here we are on Thursday talking about yet another crazy story, and this one's nuts. So anyway, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. Pretty decent audience in here to listen to this Vince McMahon stuff. If you are not a subscriber, please become a subscriber. Hit that button right below, that like button. I would love you if to smash that as well. It would be much appreciated. And let me just cruise over here to the chat for a second. Unfortunately, with an audience like this, I'm not going to be able to shout out everybody, but I do want to hit some channel members and any super chats that might be in here. And then we will try to dissect a little bit of this lawsuit and look at some of the key points and the key allegations in here and how gross some of these things are. And like I said earlier, just as a warning, there is going to be some graphic content detailed here. So if that's something that bothers you, please feel free to not watch this video. I will not be offended. If we have time, we'll talk about some other stories too. Kevin Patrick was booted out of WWE today, so he's been released. We did hear that he was removed from the SmackDown commentary team. Last Friday was going to be his last night. And then they just outright released him, which kind of sucks because I thought, you know, what sucks about that situation, not to get too much into it now, we'll talk about it tomorrow, but I feel like if they just wouldn't have put Kevin Patrick on the announced team, he might still be working there because he was doing backstage interviews and whatnot, and now he is jobless, so we wish him the best. I did not mind Kevin Patrick, but I understand that maybe he wasn't fitting what WWE was looking for in that role, so we wish him the best, and we'll see what they do tonight. No, I'm sorry, tomorrow. Today's Thursday. I don't even know what day it is. Tomorrow on SmackDown, who is going to be the commentary team. Anyway, I'm going to go through here and just say hello to a few people that I recognize, specifically the channel members like Michael Kumo. Brock, is Brock a part of this? Kind of. He was referenced in receiving some pictures, things like that. I think he was definitely aware of Vince's behavior, and he was kind of mentioned here, but not as bad as Mr. Laurinaitis was. So at least I don't think Brock was involved in any of these threesomes or anything like that. Good to see Jay Lambo, Nikita Abalakin, Sonic Plays. What's up, Zane G? We also have Jet the Hawk, who's a good, nice mod up in here. Max Pokebra, Endeavor and TKO needs to drop him now. Well, that's... You know, Vince McMahon is so far out of kind of the way now. I'm going to let that process play out. I'm not going to be too uppity about getting like Vince out of everything completely, because that's going to be a business and corporate type of thing that I'll let them handle. If Vince McMahon was still running creative right now and he was still back there at Gorilla with the pencil, I would be with you, Max. I'm like, get him out of here now, yesterday. But since he's just fucking in the background, that process will play out. And I do believe Vince will have no choice but to leave altogether. But I'm going to kind of trust them to handle all of that, because I don't know. Like I said, I don't know what the next step is. If you're WWE, I don't know what you do. What's up, Smitty? Good to see you as well. We also have Ben Espinoza in here, Mike Rao, Strekopedia, a lot of familiar faces. Zach is here as well. Elias, Big J, what's going on? Everybody. I'm going to try to hit as many as I can. Colin Wright, appreciate that $5 from you. Hey, Greg, Clinton, Epstein, Weinstein, and McMahon, and we funded his ego in a way. Yeah, throw Trump on that list too. The Nutella smeared mustard fart sexual predator. My God, is it really that surprising that Vince and Donald are friends? They are exactly alike. It's fucking disgusting. Who else is here? Good to see Arthur, Chad. The Juliet is in the house as well. Sorry, I know there's another super I need to get to. Steeler Lee, appreciate the $2. Thank you, dude. Could TKO decide to remove WWE just because of this? No, I don't think this is good. This is bad. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think that would have anything to do with the merger, the current merger between TKO and WWE, because of Vince's the step back that he's taken. Plus, Vince unloaded a whole bunch of stock a couple of months ago. And then when WWE went to Netflix and The Rock joined the board, the stock price skyrocketed the other day. So that's kind of funny that Vince sold when it was down and then it went up. But I don't think there's going to be any worry of WWE, the company, folding or going out of business. I really would doubt that, but it ain't good. Either way, there's going to be a lot to figure out, a lot of damage control, and a lot of rebuilding and trying to just restructure their reputation after Vince McMahon goes. I think that's going to be a top priority of WWE and TKO once Vince McMahon is completely out of the picture, is they're going to want to change this perception of them, because it's been nearly 40 years now, close to 40 years, where Vince McMahon has been suspected of being a really, really dirty person. This goes all the way back to the early 80s when he bailed Jimmy Snuka out from murdering his wife, and then the Rita Chatterton stuff, the Ring Boy scandal, the steroid scandal, the screw job. God knows who else. God knows who else he's fucking backstage. And, his relationship with Linda McMahon and everything he did on television, not to mention what we heard behind the scenes. It's just a mess. Chris Miner, appreciate the 10 from you. This makes his segments, like him and Trish, or him hiring Stacy Keibler as his personal assistant, age poorly. They always did age poorly. Even without those aged pretty bad. But even now, knowing what we know about Vince, it's even worse, man. It's even worse. This makes me sick beyond my stomach. I hope he is Benoit. Never mentioning Vince again is going to be hard to do. I do feel pretty confident that we shouldn't have to worry about him going into the Hall of Fame this year, which is something that I was thinking could happen. WrestleMania 40 is a good milestone number. And if they wanted to put Vince McMahon in, this would be a pretty good year to do it, but I can't see that happening now. And I think WWE does need to distance themselves as much as possible from anything Vince McMahon related, but that's going to be really hard to do when Vince has had his fingerprints on that company for 5+ decades now, almost. So it's an ugly situation. What's up, How Weezy? Just getting off work. Glad you're here. So anyway, this whole situation is a mess. Let's talk a little bit about it, okay? So Vince McMahon, he was hit today with a massive sex trafficking, sexual assault, and emotional abuse lawsuit that was filed by his accuser, Janelle Grant. She was fired in 2022 where she signed 2022 where she signed an NDA that was supposed to pay her $3 million, and no payments came after the first $1 million installment. And I believe she was hired in 2019 by Vince McMahon, and in the lawsuit it details basically this private meeting where she met with Vince McMahon and discussed losing her parents and the hard times and hardships she has fell on. They had some small talk about their personal lives, and Vince McMahon talked about his life as well, and wound up basically offering her what sounded like a too good to be true job. And, she thanked him. They hugged. Vince McMahon then invited her to join him at WrestleMania that year. And I think up until that point, she was thinking the relationship was pretty innocent. And it says that Miss Grant's sent Vince, is it Grant or Grant? Miss Grant, excuse me. Miss Grant sent Vince McMahon a text message about the wrestling product in 2009, which he immediately turned into a sexual thing and started naming dildos after wrestlers and whatnot. And that's kind of where I want to talk about a little bit of this 67-page lawsuit. So some of this, I took a few snippets of transcripts from Fightful, and I also copied some paragraphs from the actual lawsuit itself. But here is one basic summation of some of the behavior that Vince McMahon was doing as it relates to Mrs. Grant. And I quote, notably, McMahon was most aggressive when he was using certain sex toys named after male WWE wrestlers and performers. McMahon named the sex toys so that the color of the toy matched the race of the wrestler. For example, a black dildo would be named after an African-American wrestler, while a white dildo would be named after a Caucasian. I love that they needed to break that down for us like we didn't get it. In addition to McMahon's infatuation with pretending that other men, and namely certain WWE talent, were in the room with them, this was yet another incremental step in desensitizing Mrs. Grant to his fantasy and eventual demands that she perform sex acts for and or have sexual contact with others in WWE. Now, here are some actual notes from the lawsuit. On February 3rd, 2020, McMahon sent a message to Miss Grant advising he had been informed by WWE Corporate Officer Number 2, so we haven't gotten any names there, that there were a lot of rumors circulating about the two. McMahon warned Miss Grant that rumors were not good for either of them, and then on February 10th, 2020, without any advance warning, Miss Grant was temporarily relocated to the XFL workforce. Mrs. Grant having been desperate to escape the feeling of being trapped in her existence at WWE, applied to remain with the XFL on March 6, 2020. She openly vocalized her desire to remain with the XFL colleagues, even referring to her state of work at WWE as nothingness. And she sought permission to make the change official from WWE employee number 1 and corporate officer number 4 before informing McMahon. Days after this, during which time she had finally told McMahon about her application to remain with the XFL, her request was denied. In the weeks that followed, despite McMahon's warning about rumors and direction to Miss Grant to play dumb, he began showing explicit photos of Miss Grant to people both inside and outside the company. Jesus fucking Christ. McMahon then recruits other men and forces Mrs. Grant into sex trafficking. In May of 2020, McMahon had recruited an individual whom he manipulatively referred to as his friend to engage in a threesome with McMahon and Mrs. Grant. The friend turned out to be McMahon's physical therapist at Alternative Clinic and is referred to as physical therapist. So this isn't even Johnny Ace. This is his physical therapist. To induce Miss Grant's participation in the threesome, McMahon began referring to Miss Grant as his girlfriend and sent her a large bouquet of flowers. Nevertheless, on May 8th, 2020, Miss Grant expressed apprehension about participating in the threesome. In response, McMahon insisted that the plans were already made and suggested he would lose a friendship if she did not go through with it. On the day of the threesome, Miss Grant showed up to the condo, but reiterated that she did not want to go through with the act. She expressed fear of being thrown around like a rag doll by McMahon and physical therapist after Miss Grant clearly stated she wanted to back out. McMahon responded by telling Miss Grant for the first time that he loved her, stunning her into silence. McMahon's manipulative tactic resulted in the outcome he wanted, and he led her down the stairs to the bedroom where the physical therapist was already waiting to begin the threesome. That's nice. At least you're ready to go, right? Early in the encounter, McMahon immediately directed Miss Grant to lay down on her back in a supplicating position. While straddling over her, McMahon defecated on Miss Grant's head. I will repeat that. McMahon defecated on Miss Grant's head. That's 6 pounds of skull and brain on top of your shoulders. That's what he shit on. McMahon then left to shower off, but he instructed Miss Grant to remain in place with excrement in her hair and to continue performing for his friend. While Miss Grant requested protection, none was offered. McMahon and physical therapist actively continued with the threesome and directed Miss Grant's sexual performance for around an hour and a half while she was covered in feces. Following the threesome, McMahon sent an explicit message to Miss Grant that further detailed his fantasies of seeing her engaged in sexual relations. McMahon then pressured Miss Grant into several additional threesomes, in large part because she felt she had no other choice, particularly after McMahon's comments that he had personally ensured that she had not lost her job. There's more, but like that right there is one of a few examples of things that actually went on in these threesomes. And Vince McMahon, I mean, this guy is so fucking all mumbling. I mean, he's just so disgusting. I mean, just shitting on people and stuff. Like, what's going on? So it goes on here to say that, here it is. Her subsequent run-ins with physical therapist at Alternative Clinic also served as a reminder of how much was at stake if she did not obey. Vince McMahon controlled Mrs. Grant's employment, income, paid for her medical care, circulated naked pictures of her, and ignored her lack of consent for the threesome. Indeed, when text conversations would begin to cross over from McMahon's fantasies into reality, Miss Grant often attempted to avoid physical encounters. And here it says physical encounters with the physical therapist, as on September 23rd, 2020, when she told McMahon there was no room for a third body. Okay. After the threesomes began, McMahon had become more sadistic in his fantasies, focused on control, such as choking, sensory deprivation, pain, humiliation, and group scenarios in which Miss Grant was to be physically overwhelmed and subservient. On one occasion, he instructed Miss Grant, "Do not knock on the door, because if I see you, I will rape you in the hallway." That's nice. To leave no doubt regarding the dynamic of the relationship, on May 12th, 2020, we're backtracking a bit, McMahon texted Grant, "I'm the only one who owns you and controls you, who I want to fuck you." So that's a weird sentence, but, and there's a U. It's not spelled you like Y-O-U, it's just you. This was a theme often reiterated throughout their involvement together. On June 17th, 2020, Miss Grant sent text to McMahon noting her one-year anniversary joining WWE, which McMahon completely ignored. Now, here's another little summation of some of the things that went down. On June 21st, McMahon and defendant Laurinaitis sexually assaulted Miss Grant inside Laurinaitis' office in WWE headquarters while colleagues were busy at their desks. Behind a locked door, the two men cornered her and pulled her in between them, forcibly touched her before ultimately putting her on top of a table in between them. She begged them to stop, but they forced themselves on her, each taking turns restraining her for the other while saying, "No means yes and take it, bitch." In March 2020, McMahon began sharing sexually explicit photographs began sharing sexually explicit photos and videos of Miss Grant, including the pornographic content he had recorded with other men, both inside and outside the company, including with members of television production, tech team, executives, producers, and a world-famous athlete and former UFC heavyweight champion with whom WWE was actively trying to sign a new contract and ultimately did. Kevin Dunn just resigned from the company just a few weeks ago. He's been gone since, I guess, the end of the year. And the fact that Vince McMahon is sharing these photos and videos with executives and tech people, that makes you wonder if one of these, I mean, Vince McMahon and Kevin Dunn have had a long-standing relationship, even going back to Kevin Dunn's dad being there and the whole tape story and the burning car and all that. You don't think that Vince McMahon might nudge Kevin Dunn, "Hey, look at this, pal," and show him his phone? Of course he would. Of course he would. Absolutely a fucking course he would. So Kevin Dunn's definitely one of those motherfuckers. And we know that Brock Lesnar is as well. Goes on to say that during the May 18th, 2019 encounter, so we're going back a year here, Miss Grant felt coerced into engaging in sexual activity and that McMahon had trapped her in an impossible situation, and she feared adverse career and personal consequences and legal retaliation if she declined his advances. McMahon stated, "This is what I've been waiting for," as he performed oral sex on Miss Grant. Miss Grant asked that protection be used, and McMahon responded that there was no need to worry because he was clean. Yeah, sounds like it. Feeling that she was being used for his gratification, Miss Grant went numb and was unable to make eye contact. McMahon then flipped on his back and said, "Okay, jack him off." So I have to pause between each paragraph just to absorb this nonsense. On March 26, 2020, McMahon sent a lengthy message to Miss Grant describing in detail the circumstances surrounding sharing explicit photographs of Miss Grant to a former WWE referee. McMahon described how WWE referee left to masturbate and told Miss Grant she had made a perfect stranger very happy. I'm just going to let you guys soak that in for a second. You done? Okay, we'll continue. McMahon became the most important figure in Mrs. Grant's life, and he meticulously asserted power and control over almost every aspect of it. Miss Grant feared Miss Grant's fears intensified over the consequences that could result from McMahon's actions, particularly by sharing her naked pictures. She became paranoid, completely dependent on and worshipfully devoted to Vince McMahon. So Vince McMahon here was really using his power to control this employee, to use her as an object, as his pet, and that's fucking gross. This lawsuit was 67 pages long. You can read the whole thing. It's online. Whole entire 67-page document. I only read you about a page and a half of details, maybe 2 pages of details, max. And it's 67 pages long. Those are some of the juicier bits. I have the entire lawsuit here. It's right here for me. If there's any other thing I could maybe mention, I'm going to kind of scan through some of these paragraphs here. We'll see what else we can talk about here. Now, here's some early on just notes in the lawsuit because it pretty much goes in chronological order. On May 16th, 2019, McMahon informed Miss Grant that he had obtained 2 tickets to the Belmont Stakes scheduled for June 8th, 2019. On May 17th of that year, Miss Grant received an offer letter from WWE for an entry-level job as a legal administrator coordinator with a salary of $75,000. So this is, I guess, during the time when Vince said, we're going to set you up with a job. That was all happening there. Read all of that already. Read some of that. Miss Grant was immediately surprised that there was not much work assigned to her, struggling even to appear busy in her new role. In stark contrast to colleagues who complained about overflowing inboxes, Miss Grant's phone only overflowed with controlling and sexually charged text messages from the chairman and CEO, reminding her of both McMahon's power and ever-present surveillance. Colleagues shared onboarding stories with Miss Grant and talked about receiving pre-made binders of information or the opportunity to shadow departing employees, none of which happened for Miss Grant, nor did anyone know of her unusual title of administrator coordinator, or what that meant. So it sounds like Vince almost like created this position for her and just paid her so he can have her there to use her, basically buying a slave. A sex slave, and in a lot of ways. I got such a big company. We'll just find a place for you in the office. We'll stick you in a corner, give you a title, pay you $75,000, and then you can come suck my wrinkly, disgusting cock whenever I say. I mean, what the fuck, y'all? This is so disturbing, and yet, like I said, so incredibly unsurprising. I mean, I'm without speech. And I'm sorry for that. I mean, there's nearly 500 people in the chat here right now, and I don't feel like I'm telling you guys a whole lot and offering too many opinions because my opinions are just fuck Vince, fuck Vince, fuck Vince. This is extremely disturbing. But, we knew that something like this was going to come out. We knew at some point we were going to get another major bombshell. And I'm wondering, I hope just the floodgates open now because I'm dying to know what that federal investigation is about that we heard about all the way like last summer, something like that. So Vince McMahon has got a lot of people investigating him. He has a lot of lawsuits. He has a lot of women coming forward. And it sounds like it took long enough, but his past is finally starting to catch up to him. And you would think with, Vince McMahon has been so incredibly lucky. All of these different scandals that WWE has had, that he has been able to survive every one. He's survived a lot, going all the way back, when he got, Hulkamania brought in. Who knows what the WWE would have become had Hulk Hogan wouldn't have been able to be lured away from AWA. And the success of WrestleMania 1 really helped build and give WWE the foundation that made it what it is today. But then you also had that Ring Boy scandal. You had the steroid trial. Vince McMahon was facing jail time. Then you've got WCW coming around and they show up onto the scene and they really put the pressure on WWE, pushing them down to the number 2 company for the first time in their history. And Vince McMahon survives that. They survived the Montreal Screwjob. Everything that Vince has been able to survive from a company and a personal level, it's given him the belief that he is bulletproof. And, some people who do something really stupid or they dodge a major bullet or they get really lucky, like, I could have gone to jail for that. I didn't. That's going to be my wake-up call. I'm going to change my ways. You would think that Vince McMahon would recognize the luck that he has had so far in his life and try to change those ways. But if anything, his behavior got worse because he was he did have that false sense of security that he can do anything. Even the fans had it. Remember when all this stuff first happened and Vince McMahon, these allegations first came out a couple of years ago, and it wasn't like your typical Vince McMahon stuff. I mean, I said right from the start, I'm like, guys, this is the real deal. This is the real deal. This isn't going to be something that Vince McMahon can just brush off or WWE can just ignore and then it goes away and the fans are right back to, cheering for Vince McMahon again. This is a big deal. The company is not going to want him around. And granted, it took a while. But, Vince McMahon was eventually kind of pushed to the side. But many fans around that time, when all of that stuff first happened, a lot of YouTubers, I saw it all over the place, a lot of the same type of opinions that none of this matters. Vince McMahon is just going to do whatever he wants. WWE is a publicly traded company now. They have a board of directors. There is a lot more going on in the ownership of WWE than just Vince McMahon. Back in the mid-90s, when it was just Vince and Linda owning it and running it out of their den in their Stamford house, then yes, Vince McMahon maybe can do whatever he wants, but you can't have corporate CEOs anymore behaving like this because even some of the biggest companies have had to out some of their people. Now, granted, Vince McMahon, still was defiant, did not want to leave, and he even muscled his way back in for a short time before the merger happened, and and he got played, and he's pretty much out on his ass now anyway. But right from the start, even the fans were buying into the bulletproof nature of Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon, everybody knows Vince isn't going to go away. He's never going to go away. I'm like, it's not going to be up to him. Of course we know if it's up to him, he's not going to go away. Just like fucking Nutella smeared mustard fart didn't leave the White House when he got his ass kicked. And it's the same thing. They have so much ego and they're so delusional to that own power, but it's not really reality. It's the reality in their head, but it's not actually reality. And it was kind of bugging me that fans were buying into that. I'm like, I understand that Vince McMahon thinks he can do whatever he wants. I know that, but he can't do whatever he wants, because if he could, he would still be right there. And I think that's what a lot of the Vince McMahon little disgusting farewell tour he had there, where he retired, where he came out on TV 2 or 3 times first, then he officially retired. That was his way of being defiant, because he's so delusional. I don't even think he understands sometimes the consequences and the deep shit that he is in and the hot water he puts himself and the company in. This is Vince McMahon's baby. This is his child, the WWE that he has nurtured and grown. You would think that Vince McMahon would want to do everything in his power to ensure that when he's gone, WWE continues to be a permanent fixture in entertainment in the world, and his legacy lives on to go on to even bigger heights than it saw under his leadership. And when you read about the details here, it's amazing how strong the desire to be a pervert can be. And how many times have we seen this just in life, in the world? Celebrities, athletes, CEOs, other people in big positions of power or celebrity statuses doing really perverted, disgusting things, whacking off in theaters and all this stuff. It amazes me how much being horny can make you risk everything. You're willing to risk your entire life to bust a nut. And that's the way it is in this world. It really feels that way. The baby batter in the brain will fuck your head up, as they said in something about Mary. And it will make you make very, very bad decisions. And Vince McMahon, with so much riding on this, the legacy of himself, the company, his family, he's got a slew of grandkids that are going to be carrying around that McMahon name, and behaving this way, knowing the damage it could do if it got out, and just trusting that people are going to keep their mouth shut, and then you can just stop paying them, only pay them a third of the NDA agreement, and then you think they're going to still keep their mouth shut. You weren't worried about this, Vince McMahon? When you stopped paying her, you weren't worried that she might come forward? This didn't concern you at all? None of these other women that you had all of these gross-ass relationships with and sharing things with employees, with people who could roll over on you if they wanted to, with referees, with tech people, with cameramen, with Kevin Dunn, with Brock Lesnar. You're sending what are you, 15? Like, what the fuck? This is crazy behavior. Not for a regular person, much less an old-ass man like this. And Vince McMahon is a genius, they say. Is he? Why? I'm like I said, I can't even talk. Like, it's such a crazy thing to think about that Vince McMahon would be willing to risk everything. You know, that day, that night in that hotel, when he's shitting on this woman's hair and then continuing a threesome, he's got to be thinking in his head, if anybody ever knew about this, I could be in some trouble. That's not a boner killer to him or something? Like, I cannot believe that the behavior and the complete lack of concern for your victim, the damage you're doing, the emotional damage you're doing to another human being, and the damage you're doing to your company, the irreparable damage you've now done to your reputation, although it's pretty much been ruined for a while now. I've been very anti-Vince for a lot of years now. His behavior, the way he is, I just don't like him. I've always acknowledged and admitted what he meant to WWE and, what a big part of their growth he was. But as a human being, my God, they don't get any more gross than this guy. And Vince McMahon has still had a lot of people loyal to him. Brock Lesnar's been loyal to him. Steve Austin has been loyal to him. And you very rarely are going to ever hear them say anything bad about Vince McMahon. The Undertaker, same thing. And you have to think about these people too. Like, I'm sure Undertaker knew about the way Vince McMahon was. There's absolutely no doubt that he was at least aware of these things. If the fans are aware of it, Undertaker damn sure is aware of it. You think about John Cena and other people who have been close to Vince that are probably going to have no choice now but to just either distance themselves from Vince or just be honest when asked about him. Because next time John Cena does a red carpet or an interview, hey, what do you make of the allegations about your former boss, Vince McMahon? And then John Cena is going to have to answer that. And it sucks for him, but at the same time, like, I advise everybody to be honest and straightforward and transparent. I think that's the best course of action here if you're in WWE. And at the Royal Rumble on Saturday, I'm really curious if they're going to do that media presser. They're probably going to have to, because I feel like if they cancel it, it's going to be obvious why they're canceling it. They don't want to talk about Vince McMahon, but at the same time, that might make them look bad as well. I think maybe they should start the presser and Triple H should issue just one blanket statement. We're going to say one thing right now, and that's all we're going to say about it, because I know everybody's going to have these questions. The company is aware of the allegations on Vince McMahon. We're dealing with it internally. We do not condone these actions. All that shit that you're supposed to say, that diplomatic shit that you're supposed to say, that's what I would advise they do. Just get it out there right away. And then, some of the media is going to ask questions about that anyway, but at least if you get that one statement out, you can just defer for the rest of the night. You know how Tony Khan just kind of dances around and sometimes just flat out refuses to answer shit? If you just give a big statement later on when Triple H is asked about that stuff, he can just say, hey, I explained all that in the beginning. It's all I can really say about it right now, but we really want to talk about tonight's show. And Triple H too. I like Triple H. I always have, but Triple H is Vince McMahon's son-in-law. Stephanie McMahon is his daughter. There are a lot of people very close with Vince McMahon and Triple H. I seriously doubt received any of these naked pictures from Vince showing him all these employees that he's whose heads he's shitting on and stuff. But I don't think that Triple H was ever involved in this. But in terms of him knowing, in terms of Triple H perhaps participating in a cover-up, yes, I've always believed that. While simultaneously singing the praises of Triple H being the head of creative, I've also acknowledged for the past year that he's probably known about all of this and probably helped a little bit to conspire to keep it quiet or cover it up as long as humanly possible. There's just no way. Triple H is the father to 4 of Vince McMahon's granddaughters, is he not? How many kids they have? 3 or 4? That one son of Shane McMahon looks exactly like Vince. He's a college football player, I think at Indiana. He looks like he could be a wrestler, man. And now he's going to come in as the grandson of Vince McMahon, which could be a great gimmick. But now this might be the final nail in the coffin of the reputation of Vince McMahon. Because granted, there's still a lawsuit here. There's still things that are going to have to be settled and whatnot. But, when you start involving language like sex trafficking, that's gnarly. And this has taken it into a whole different avenue now, because this isn't just about somebody being a pervert. Now we're talking about, some serious crimes here. So not to mention all the other things that Vince McMahon has, going right now with all of the other investigations. So I have not done any, I guess, reading so far of any sort of reaction from the wrestling world about this. I mean, I pretty much came up here right after reading the lawsuit, copy and pasting a couple of key paragraphs there, and then coming up and talking about it. So I don't know what social media is saying. I don't know what Vince's peers or wrestlers or anybody is saying at all right now. And I don't know what the reaction is out there in the wrestling community. Are there YouTubers coming up doing videos like me freaking out about this? Holy shit, this is a big deal. It's just horrible. It's just bad timing too. I mean, at least it's Royal Rumble. Maybe a lot of this can be blown over by the time it gets to WrestleMania and we can try to enjoy WrestleMania, but it's really hard to talk like that. In my head, part of me wants to say, oh man, I hate this distraction. I really want to enjoy Royal Rumble and I want to enjoy WrestleMania season. And that's true, I do, but you can't help but think about the victims here. And you can't help but think about the trauma that these people went through with Vince McMahon. And I don't want to hear any bullshit. Oh, well, she willingly went through this. If you're a man saying this, if you're some dipshit man going out of your way to defend Vince McMahon, I think that's really, really fucked up and a gross misunderstanding of the power that men want and can have over women. Men have this, especially rich and powerful men, they really like to be in charge, they like to be in control, and they like to have human pets. And these women a lot of times are scared into thinking there is no way out. You might read some of these incidents here and think in your head, oh my God, why didn't she just do this? Or why didn't she just do that? You're not in her shoes. You don't know what this universal world is like. And there's so many different examples of this throughout all of business and the corporate world, and rich and powerful men being abusive, especially sexually, to women. It always happens. It's a very, very scary and difficult thing for women to constantly have to worry about in the workplace. And when you are in a situation like this, granted, she's going to condos and participating in threesomes and stuff, but when you have the circumstances in her life that she had and the circumstances that got her hired and the things that Vince said and the threats he made, she did feel like obviously that she was trapped and couldn't get out. And then finally, when she did get out and Vince paid her off, he never even paid her off. So then she's like, I'm going to come forward and spill the beans, bitch. It's just ugly, man. And if Vince McMahon is naming dildos after wrestlers and crapping on employees' hair, what's he been doing? And he's doing this in his mid to late 70s. What was he doing in his 40s? Do we even want to know? No, we don't want to know. Man, this shit's ugly, man. It's just ugly. So I am going to just see what you guys have to say about this nonsense in the chat. By the way, if you could do me a favor and smash that thumbs up button, it would be greatly appreciated. Get them likes up. Okay, here we go. Danny Huckins says TKO released a statement through Variety. Okay, let's see if we can find this. Here it is right here. Got it right here. I am pulling up Wrestling Inc. was the first one. Okay. This is from Ross Berman of Wrestling Inc. News of a sex trafficking lawsuit against Vince McMahon and WWE dropped. Oops, sorry, lost it. There we go. I'm going to go over here. This is where I want to read it because I can't read this one very well because it's glitchy. Let's read this one. Okay, we're switching publications now. We're over on Fightful now. This is from Jeremy Lambert. TKO issues a statement, and it reads, in a statement to Variety, a TKO spokesperson said, and I quote, Mr. McMahon does not control TKO, nor does he oversee the day-to-day operations of WWE. While this matter predates our TKO executive team's tenure at the company, we take Ms. Grant's horrific allegations very seriously and are addressing this matter internally. And that is a pretty simple statement, which is pretty much echoing what I said earlier when somebody mentioned in the chat, could Endeavor just get rid of WWE? I'm like, that's not going to happen because this is just Vince McMahon and he does not control WWE. He's not involved in it like he was. And I said, if this would have been 10 years ago happening, then this would have been much more serious and Vince McMahon still would have been at the top of, the creative chain and there would have been massive changes in WWE with something like this happening prior to this merger, or even a few years ago, kind of like it did. And we saw all those changes happen already. In that time, we've seen the merger. We've seen Vince McMahon's role diminished. We've seen Triple H's role increased. And now Vince McMahon is really, in the merger, just pushed aside as a figurehead, as a statue, just to sit there and do very little. So of all the times for something like this to drop on Vince McMahon in terms of how it affects the WWE product and how drastically it can change that, the effects there are probably going to be pretty minimal, other than just, more bad public perception of WWE. And TKO made it clear in that statement that these allegations predate their merger, which is really important because this is a new era in WWE, and getting that merger done and pushing Vince McMahon out, isn't going to have a negative effect on Endeavor. They're trying to move away from this perception and this reputation of WWE and Vince McMahon. And I think that was all part of the merger here. So they're addressing the situation internally, according to TKO. And like I said, WWE will probably be doing damage control internally, but maybe even on camera, because if Brock Lesnar was scheduled to be at the Royal Rumble on Saturday, which we all heard that he was going to be, I thought he was going to come in and set up a match with Gunther at WrestleMania. That should not happen now, I don't believe. I think they should keep Brock out of this. Luckily, at least Brock wasn't in that hotel room with the threesome and all that, but Brock kind of being sort of mentioned here, even though not by name. I wonder if WWE just wants to really do their best to not make anything about the Royal Rumble or WrestleMania season linked to this. And if that means getting Brock off the card, maybe that's what you have to do. But then again, Vince McMahon's own son-in-law, who most people I believe are going to be of the belief that he's always known about this shit, maybe that changes people's, I guess, perception of his behavior as well. I don't know. I don't know how that's really going to affect Triple H, but TKO seems to be behind him. I don't think Triple H's job is in jeopardy with maybe the TKO corporate structure, but maybe public opinion is going to change a little bit. But again, these are all things that we've all kind of known in the back of our minds about Triple H, is that there's no way he's going to be able to really play dumb in this situation. So that's why the scrum on Saturday after the Royal Rumble could be extremely interesting, depending on what's asked. But it's a mess. All right, let me see what you guys are saying about this. Thank you. Okay, let's go to let me go over here to Twitter, because apparently Brandon Thurston has some information as well. Sorry, guys. It's hard when I've got multiple computers here. There we go. Let's see what Brandon has to say about this. Okay, I'm just trying to see if... So Brandon says, we knew this. We talked about this a minute ago. Before selling over 8 million shares yesterday... This was back in November. Before selling 8 million shares, Vince McMahon held about 30 million TKO shares, according to the filings, which is about 16% of the company. There are roughly 100. Okay, so he's basically just saying there, just a reminder, gone are the days of Vince holding super shares that allowed him to control the vote while holding less than a majority of shares. That was the case for WWE pre-merger, no longer upon the formation of TKO. So that's probably him just reminding us that Vince McMahon isn't going to be able to use his Vince McMahon power to stay put. He is probably going to have to go here, and he doesn't have any of the protections that he had before. Like I said a couple of years ago, when all the fans are like, none of this matters, Vince McMahon's just going to stay anyway. I'm like, you guys don't understand. And they didn't. And here we are, nearly a couple of years later, and things are still dropping on this guy. Here we are 2 years almost after these first allegations started coming up. Vince McMahon perhaps gets hit with the biggest one yet, and there's more to come, because don't forget that federal investigation as well. So Vince McMahon's, stroke in the company is not going to protect him this time once TKO decides internally what they're going to have to do with him. And I think there's a lot of people in that company too. I think Ari Emanuel, who doesn't like Vince, you can tell. Nick Khan, who has been, Vince's close right-hand business ally there. But even Nick Khan, I think, knows what's best for WWE, and Vince McMahon ain't it. Nick Khan has been very smart in his handling of all of this. And I think that they have been positioning the company to be able to push and eliminate Vince when it happens. Like, basically, I think Nick Khan has always known that some more big shit's going to come out about Vince. Another shoe is going to drop. I think Ari Emanuel knows that. I think a lot of people in the internal, core structure of Endeavor, TKO, and WWE know this as well. And I think part of that merger and how the deal was made was done in a way that when the next big Vince McMahon shit happens, they're not going to be handcuffed anymore by his power. That's the way it was all looking. Even the way a lot of people said, oh, Vince McMahon got played. He got the deal that he wanted. And then as soon as he was in, they knighted Triple H, the official head of creative, and said, no more Vince McMahon. He's not going to be a part of that. And now they're able to call more of the shots, which means Vince McMahon isn't going to be able to use any sort of power at all to stay in power. It's not going to work like that. That makes me happy. And I think once we get to the end of this investigation or whatever TKO determines here, I don't think this is something that, can really be drug out a year. And then a year from now, TKO finally decides to cut ties with Vince McMahon permanently. This is something that's going to have to happen quicker than that, because I seriously doubt Vince McMahon is going to want to actually have court proceedings over this, actually go to perhaps trial over this. This feels like it's going to be a settlement type of thing just to stop the bleeding. But I feel like either way, the damage is going to be done. And Vince McMahon, with text messages and the evidence and everything against him, he's not going to be able to claim his innocence here. What's he going to do? Come out and make a statement? I'm completely innocent. This woman's completely full of shit. Who's going to believe that? Who's going to believe that? Especially when there's damning evidence, there's screenshots of text messages, that especially when law enforcement is involved, can be determined if it's fake or not. And I feel like everything that we read in that lawsuit happened. I really do. And Janelle Grant, she has her own problems. She obviously was participating in a lot of this stuff, but sounds like a lot of it was either against her will or being performed under extreme fear and paranoia. And that's what these powerful men can do to these women. They can mentally break them. I think that's part of their goal. I think part of that power that they want to exhibit and have over other people, specifically women, a lot of that is mental. They want to manipulate them. They want to mentally incapacitate them, so to speak, so they can control everything about them and use them whenever their desires arise. And it's really, really disgusting that this world has too many Vince McMahons and too many Vince McMahons, too many Trumps, too many Elon Musks, and not enough Taylor Swifts, to be honest. Not enough people that do good with their money, that don't use their celebrity status or their power to manipulate, control, demean, degrade, and hold down others. It's just really, really, really gross. And as a wrestling fan, it's really disappointing. I've been watching wrestling for 40 years, primarily Vince McMahon's product. There was a time in wrestling where I was a massive fan of Vince McMahon, the performer out on TV. I thought he was one of the best heels in the business. I think Austin and McMahon, their feud saved the WWE, kicked off the Attitude Era. Vince McMahon was always a trip as an announcer. We always got a kick out of goofing off on him or goofing on him or how he talks, how he is. And even though we've always known Vince McMahon had a perverted side, this is the type of stuff that just really makes you look at him, even a lot worse than somebody like Ric Flair, who think about how disgusting he is. And it sucks too that, Vince McMahon and his legacy going to be tainted, tarnished by this. And you have to wonder now, it was hard enough. On Tuesday was the 40th anniversary of Hulk Hogan's first title win over the Iron Sheik in Madison Square Garden. I struggled with deciding whether or not to make a video about that. I'm like, I don't like Hulk Hogan. My audience knows that. But at the same time, this is a big anniversary, and it's one that's very significant to my life because from ages 5 to 10, I was a pretty massive Hulkamaniac there. I remember when he beat the Iron Sheik. I remember when he won the title. So I did a 40-minute video, and I spent the first 5 minutes explaining why I don't have any respect for Hogan, why I lost respect for him in the first place, and all of the nasty parts of his life and his career. And I wanted to disclose that first before acknowledging the very significant anniversary, of the birth of Hulkamania. And that birth, arguably, not even arguably, it did change the business forever. And, Chris Benoit, another example, the Chris Benoit tragedy, and what that did to his legacy. Only in this case, there were murders involved, so who fucking cares about his legacy at that point? But same thing with Vince McMahon. It's really hard as a wrestling fan that has watched this stuff my whole life, and Vince McMahon and Hulk Hogan and so many other massive pieces of this pro wrestling puzzle are tarnished and tainted. It's worse than the steroid scandal in baseball. It's just crazy. And all of these, disgraced legends, and Vince McMahon being and is going to go down as the most successful promoter in the history of the business. And all of this disgusting shit is going to be attached to him. It's just fucked up. I just wish wrestling could be a little bit more not gross. It's really hard to justify being a wrestling fan sometimes when there are so many really disturbing and fucked up and abhorrent scandals and behavior by a lot of the people involved. It's disheartening. It's disappointing as a wrestling fan, and it just makes you feel dirty. And I don't want to feel dirty. I want to feel clean. I feel dirty. Well, Daniel Clark, the problem is Hulk Hogan did apologize, and his apology sucked. It just has to be sincere, and his definitely wasn't. There was a lot of chats in here, guys. I'm trying to pick out anything that I find interesting. Jeff McMahon says, not a good day to have the last name I have. That is true. Although, Jeff, I feel like you're a good dude. And all that stuff we were reading in the Vince McMahon lawsuit, I don't think Jeff would ever do that. I just don't. Ohio State Boise fan. So we got to understand here. Nobody's saying Brock Lesnar cheated on Sable or anything like that. Brock has Sable at home and he's cheating on her. That's almost as bad as Mario Lopez cheating on Ali Landry. According to the lawsuit, I didn't see anything about Brock Lesnar engaging in any of these sexual acts. It sounded like it was more Brock Lesnar receiving lewd pictures from Vince McMahon of the women that he was putting it to, is what I think. So Vince, look at there, look at this one. And he's going around showing all his friends, and everybody knows Brock Lesnar and Vince McMahon are close. Brock Lesnar walked out of the company the night that Vince McMahon retired, and they had to call him up and convince him to come back at the last minute. And Brock has always been really loyal to Vince McMahon. So they have a relationship. Everybody knows that. So I'm not surprised at all that Vince McMahon shared these photos with Brock. And I think that, she was also used to help coerce Brock into re-signing his contract, things like that. But I don't think Brock Lesnar was actually engaged in these acts based on what I read. Although it was 67 pages, maybe I missed something, but it didn't seem like that was a direct accusation from Brock. But just the fact that he's kind of involved in this, for me anyway, would be enough if I'm Triple H, if I'm WWE, just saying, we got to pull you, man. Sorry, we can't. We got to just do our best to distance ourselves from this. And then maybe Brock is like, that's horseshit. Vince sent me 2 text messages with naked chicks. What did you want me to do? I just looked at it and said, good job, boss. And that was it. Like, why are you dragging me into this? But, he got dragged in because of the lawsuit. So we'll see if he shows up or not. WWE has not announced hardly any participants for the women's or the men's Royal Rumble on Saturday. So we won't know until all 30 participants are out whether or not Brock is going to be showing up or not. But if I'm WWE, I'm not using him. WrestleMania is already going to be huge. Having Brock there would be nice. Having Brock and Gunther would be very awesome. Don't get me wrong. But I also think there you have enough strength on your roster and your card where you don't need Brock Lesnar at this year's WrestleMania. So, or maybe they don't have him at the Rumble. Maybe he comes in for WrestleMania, but they want to wait a couple of weeks to see what's going to happen here. And then they bring him in closer to WrestleMania to set up something with Gunther. Maybe that's what they do. Or maybe Gunther just wins the Royal Rumble and challenges Seth Rollins at WrestleMania and Cody faces Punk at WrestleMania. You never know. We will see. What if Damian Priest cashes in on Seth and then Punk beats Priest and then Punk and Cody for the, I don't know. Let's not get into that right now. But this coming Saturday should be interesting. By the way, we're going to be doing a live watch party of the Royal Rumble this Saturday. We're also going to be up here tomorrow at right around this time, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. on the East Coast. We're going to go live tomorrow night to predict the Royal Rumble. We'll do that ahead of SmackDown because there's probably not going to be too much happening on SmackDown that we really need to discuss on the Go Home show. And we probably won't talk much about Dynamite last night either because Dynamite wasn't really a great show. Swerve and Hardy looked pretty good. A little bit of follow-up with Hook, but for the most part, kind of a quiet Dynamite last night as well. So we'll probably just mostly talk about the Royal Rumble tomorrow and maybe follow up on anything that needs to be discussed regarding the Vince McMahon allegations. It's been a wild day. It's been a wild week. It's been a wild couple of years, man. Headline after headline after headline after headline. Vince McMahon might be bad, but, at least he didn't wear a goofy hat and some sunglasses to a media scrum because then he would have been, really bad. So when I see all of the mouth foaming, insane Tony Khan hate out there, and then these same exact people are going to defend this, that's kind of where we're sitting. That's why this country is in the position that it is, because you got half the damn country out here supporting somebody that's staring down the barrel of 91 felonies who absolutely will be a convicted felon within the year, who's an adulterer, an insurrectionist, a corrupt con man corrupt con man piece of shit. They are fine with that, but Biden mumbles sometimes, oh, he's unfit to be president. My God, look at yourselves. Listen to what you're saying. Tony Khan is weird as shit. He screams promos at us. He wears goofy shit and scrums. He hugs wrestlers when he signs them. He maybe loses his temper a couple of times on Twitter. But is he shitting in his employees' hair? No, he's not. My God. Oh, what a world. What a world. All right, guys. I think I should get out of here. I've just been mumbling and rambling now. I'm just trying to entertain the 400 people that are in here right now. But it's been a wild day, man, a wild week. Hey, there's a lot of stuff on the channel. We were here just the other day talking about the Rock TKO story and WWE Raw moving to Netflix. There's a mic drop on that. There's also a 40-minute mic drop on the 40-year anniversary of Hulkamania. And then, of course, here we're talking about this Vince stuff. We're going to be up here tomorrow to predict the Royal Rumble. We're going to be up here on Saturday to watch the Royal Rumble. And then we're going to be back here on Monday after Raw for a post-Royal Rumble live stream. The only day you're not getting me is this Sunday. Normally we'd be here to do a classic pay-per-view watch along, but my Lions and my brother-in-law's Chiefs both are in games to go to the Super Bowl, and I'm going to watch those games with family. So by the way, please root for the Detroit Lions tomorrow. If you don't mind, I would appreciate it. I was born there. I live in California now, but I was born in Detroit, and I've never been able to cheer for the Lions before. It's kind of fun. So hopefully they will win. That's the plan for this week. What else do you guys want to talk about before I get out of here? Yachiro, good to see you. Good stream, horrible subject. I hear you. Good to see you, my friend. Hopefully we will see your lovely presence here this week as we do a lot of Royal Rumble stuff. Chris Ludek, Sable. I don't recall Sable and Mero's relationship. I don't know if she cheated on him with Brock or if they were already done before she got with Brock. I don't remember. I don't like accusing somebody of cheating, especially if they didn't do it or we're not sure. I don't really remember. Vince McMahon is 78 years old right now, and he still has the sex drive of a 15-year-old high school kid, only with some really gross fetishes. I don't understand the... Please tell me there's not like a 2 Vinces 1 cup video out there or something. My God, I mean, just shitting on her head, shitting, and the feces remained in her hair while she continued the threesome. It's like, what the fuck is going on here? Ugh. It's an ugly world. Well, anyway, I feel like I'm just now kind of standing here staring into space, so I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I appreciate you guys joining us today on this live stream that I didn't expect to do. Another wild, wild day in professional wrestling, another dark day for professional wrestling and WWE, and yet another disgusting story about Vince McMahon and his behavior. And guess what? it won't even be the last one. We're going to hear more. So what a day, guys. What a day. Have a great rest of your Thursday evening. Looking very forward to hanging out with you guys tomorrow as we predict the Royal Rumble. And then on Saturday, we're going to have a party up in here watching the 2024 Royal Rumble live together. The link is up on my channel right now, so go check that out and save it for Saturday. And I'll be catching you guys then. Thank you for being here today. Have a great rest of your night, and I'll talk